So President Trump, taking questions from the D.C. press corps yesterday, had this to say about the peace process, if you will, in Eastern Europe, trying to settle the hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. His commentary directed towards Zelensky.
Over the weekend, are you talking about with Zelensky or with them?
With Zelensky and us.
And you said in an interview yesterday that you think it's time for Zelensky to start accepting things. What things are you talking about?
I think he has to be realistic, and I do wonder about, how long is it going to be till they have an election? It's a democracy. It's a long time. They haven't had an election in a long time. It's losing a lot of people. And it's possible that the people, if you look at the polls, I will say 82%, there was a poll that came out, 82% of the people are demanding a settlement be made, Ukrainian people. They want to see a settlement be made. I understand that. They're losing thousands and thousands of people a week. They want to see it ended. And I do say, at what point, when do they have an election in Ukraine? That's not casting dispersions on anybody, but they do have a massive corruption situation going on there. And they do say, when are they, people are asking this question, when do they have an election? Are they going to have an election? Or are they going to just keep it going like this? So I think it's time to get that war settled. And I think it's a war that can be settled. But it takes two to tango.
Not casting dispersions or aspersions, as the case may be. There was a confab in Florida that didn't include any conversations with the Russians. So there's ongoing effort made to effect some version of the plan that President Trump outlined. Now, of course, there's still real questions about Putin's substantive interest in coming to such an arrangement. But definitely indicating waning patience with the Zelensky regime, it would seem. Daniel DePetris joins us. He's a fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist at the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel DePetris, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Good. So give us your assessment of what Trump had to say and the state of play in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, look, ultimately, I think Trump is correct. There needs to be a compromise here. Zelensky needs to, essentially compromise on territory, which he obviously does not want to do for understandable reasons. But if you really want this war to come to a close, a sustainable endgame needs to be thought through, and part of that is going to be territory. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's an unavoidable concession that the Ukrainians are going to have to make if they really want this war to be over. The problem, of course, is Zelensky is adamantly opposed to gifting Russia any territory it does not hold currently. So that's the dispute here: is how much territory is the Ukrainians going to sign away in return for sustainable peace.
And do you think that Russia would, if Russia got the entirety of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, that Putin would sign on and abide by any armistice?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question, right? The Ukrainians are extremely worried that even if they cater to Putin's maximalist territorial demands, he would just re-up the war in a few months or a few years. And I think that's a very legitimate concern. The Ukrainians essentially have to rely on themselves here. They need to rebuild their military to a point where they can deter or at least prevent Putin from taking a second bite of the apple, or really a third bite of the apple. The Ukrainians are in a very bad position here. I know there's a lot of talk about how the Ukrainians have kind of held the Russians down, and that's very true. That's very legitimate. But the Russians have more of everything. They have more people, they have more equipment, they have more money, and we're talking about a war of attrition here. And usually the war ends with the stronger side winning. So that's where the Ukrainians are. it's very, very depressing for the Ukrainians at the moment.
And if Ukraine were to fall, after some point in time, if the fighting continued and Ukraine were to fall in its entirety, I know that the left, of course, would blame Trump for this, but all along, we've had this problem with Europe not holding up its end. They've been good at cheerleading, especially NATO, cheerleading President Trump for his leadership, but they've been less good at actually holding up their end when it comes to, for example, stopping to purchase energy from Russia. And Wall Street Journal opining as recently as yesterday when it comes to providing the military aid that they essentially had promised to Ukraine. So, I mean, if this goes badly ultimately, and Putin, continues his hostile and aggressive posture, and as you say, the resources ultimately win out over some undefined period of time, this would really be Europe that let Ukraine fall to Russia, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just by pure geography, Ukraine's future matters far more to Europe than it does to the United States. I mean, that's just an unadulterated fact. And people dispute it for some reason, but geographically speaking, yeah, Ukraine's more important to the Europeans than it is to the Americans. You're right to point out the kind of differences between rhetorical outbursts against the Russians and Europe's unwillingness to kind of put their money where their mouth is. I mean, they're starting to slowly build up their own domestic defense industries, which is a very good sign. I would argue part of that is because Trump has grown sick and tired of the Europeans just sitting on their hands doing nothing. But to their credit, Europe is starting to rebuild their militaries and throw more money into their defense budgets. But it took Europe's largest war in 80 years, as well as a U.S. president who's gotten really thin skin about this whole situation for the Europeans to act. They're doing it now, but it's a little too late now.
Closer to home, yesterday, per Pam Bondi, her ex-post on the topic, the FBI, Homeland Security, and the United States Coast Guard, with support from the Department of War, executed a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. For multiple years, the oil tanker had been sanctioned by the United States due to its involvement in an illicit oil shipping network supporting foreign terrorist organizations. The seizure, completed off the coast of Venezuela, was conducted safely and securely in our investigation alongside the Department of Homeland Security to prevent the transport of sanctioned oil. Sanctioned oil continues. The investigation continues. Escalating against Maduro, is that the subtext of this?
Oh, 100%. I think President Trump does not know what he wants to do in Venezuela yet. I know there's a lot of reporting out there right now that says, the administration is contemplating military options, from a special forces raid to airstrikes on specific targets inside Venezuela. But I genuinely don't think the administration has made a decision one way or the other. This decision to kind of take the huge vessel and take it into custody and essentially arrest the crew is certainly a way to get at the Venezuelans' budgets, which, of course, they rely on the export of crude oil for most of their foreign exchange reserves. So I think this is just another step up the escalation ladder to squeeze Maduro's finances and ideally get him to leave Caracas.
John Kirikow, a CIA whistleblower, argued on a podcast recently that China's Caribbean oil refinery is the real reason Trump is circling Venezuela with carrier groups. What's your assessment of that statement?
Yeah, I don't know if that's it could be a reason. I don't think it's the primary reason. The administration is very hesitant with explaining things about what they're doing in Venezuela for some reason. There's been very little transparency involved in this entire operation. I think this mainly has to do with getting Maduro to a place where he resigns and leaves the country. If you remember, the Trump administration, Trump in his first term, had a very extensive maximum sanctions pressure campaign on Maduro to get him to leave. It didn't work out. Obviously, Maduro is still there. But Trump is essentially following the same strategy in his second term with more military firepower behind it. So I think that's ultimately what's driving the administration's policy, not a not Chinese assets in the Western Hemisphere. But that's just my opinion.
He might also have designs on the future of Gustavo. What's the one I'm blanking? Gustavo Petro, the president, the Marxist president of Colombia. He was asked about Petro being the head of another narco state, and said this:
We have three countries sending drugs to the U.S.: Mexico, Venezuela, and Colombia. And you talked to the president of Mexico. You already talked to Nicolas Maduro. Have you considered talking to the president of Colombia, who you called a drug leader?
No, I haven't really thought too much about him. He's been fairly hostile to the United States, and I haven't given him a lot of thought. He's going to have himself some big problems if he doesn't wise up. Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next. Yes,
Mr. President.
Because we don't like people when they kill people. And they sell drugs, they kill them in the United States, and Colombia is a major manufacturer of drugs, meaning cocaine in particular, as you know.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So he sort of sounded like he talked his way into putting Gustavo Petro on the hit list. I haven't really thought a lot about him, but he's next. What about Colombia and Petro, who's to say he's been hostile to the U.S. is to understate it, considering he's called for the possible removal of Trump, and the insinuation was not politically.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Trump, advising Trump, I'd just say be patient and wait till Petro leaves office. I mean, he's going to leave office next year, and he can't run for re-election. So he's got less than a year left in his term. I don't know how much this is about Trump just kind of boasting in front of the cameras and expressing his frustration, or if this is actually going to be a real policy. I would hope it's the first, because as bad as the Colombians have been in terms of interdiction, they provide the vast majority of intelligence to the U.S. Coast Guard on drug routes in the Southern Caribbean. So, obviously, if we start bombing labs in Colombia without their consent, we risk a very significant and valuable intelligence relationship in the counter-narcotics space. So I would advise Trump to sort of hold his frustrations and just wait a little bit until Petro leaves the presidency.
You wrote in the American Conservative about the National Security Strategy document released this week, which has been treated by the D.C. press corps with the sort of usual hyperventilation, because there is some real criticism of Europe there. I mean, it's really a description of reality that is being treated as criticism. I mean, they've done it to themselves largely, but also it was received positively by flax for Putin, and so here it gives the DC press corps another opportunity to question, without saying Russian collusion, sort of insinuate, make cheap overtures that this is somehow soft on Russia and hard on Europe, and it speaks to Trump's misunderstanding of the geopolitical landscape and so forth. That was not my read on it at all. That was not Stephen Bucci's read on it from Heritage Foundation, who I spoke with earlier this week about it. Your read is what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag. I think there's some really good, refreshing things in there, particularly the elimination of the phrase rules-based international order, which the Biden administration used incessantly during the last 4 years as some sort of guidepost to how the world works. And, of course, as you know, Dan, the world does not work based on values and aspirations. It works on power and interests, those two very cold-hearted ingredients of international politics. And I think I personally appreciated the fact that this document was very hard-nosed as to what the administration is planning to do, how it plans to go about it. With that being said, it's not a perfect document. No government in history of the United States has put out a perfect document. There are some issues here in terms of how the administration plans on achieving its goal in the Western Hemisphere, whether it's being a little more hawkish than it should be, So I don't buy the DC press corps line at all. I think it's kind of hyperbolic, as you would expect. But it's not necessarily 100% aligned with my vision either. So it could be worse. It could be better.
But the idea that this is somehow soft on Russia because Russia received it positively, I mean, that's just Russia playing geopolitical games. It's critical of Europe, and so therefore we agree that the United States should take more of a role as consultant rather than commando with Europe instead of other people's affairs. Well, of course they do, but that's not a sop to Russia. That's still more of a criticism of the European Union and the European Commission over the Union. And there's a lot of justified criticisms in that direction. Europe's got to get its act together. And it's not just Trump saying it, it's Jamie Dimon saying it, it's a lot of people saying it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I find it very ironic that some of the very same people who hyperventilate about Russian propaganda and disinformation are some of the first to actually, highlight what Russian officials say at every given moment.
Take it as face value, right? Yeah, right.
Right. No, but look, you're right. I mean, Europe has a lot of issues. They need to step up and take far more responsibility for European security. The United States is ultimately works for its own security as well as European allies, but the United States is first. Every nation needs to prioritize its own security first. So I understand why people are a little disappointed about what the administration is writing here, because it goes against 30-plus years of bipartisan consensus. But it really is just a reflection of the current realities and how we navigate.
Daniel DePetris, fellow at Defense Priorities and a syndicated foreign affairs columnist at the Chicago Tribune and Newsweek. Daniel, thanks as always.
Appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.
And Daniel DePetris joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Yes, we can do that, sir. Yes, we'll get that over right away. Thank you. Bye-bye. Can you take a delivery over to Peterson Pipe Works by 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock today?
Yeah, I'm stuck in the office all day. I don't have time to drive it over, especially with all the construction on 294. The client is waiting.
Okay, no problem.